Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our digital Q&A session with Annie Handmer. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm here speaking to you from the lands of the Kaurna people, but I would like to actually acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait and basically just the people who traditionally own Australia from all across, because I'm aware of the fact that we might have people joining us from all over Australia. I'd like to recognise their connection to the land, waters and the sky, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any First Nations people who might be joining today. My name is Hannah, and I'm a space communicator here at the Australian Space Discovery Centre in Adelaide. And today I'm assisted by Shagaf and Nate. They will be fielding all your questions. So throughout the Q&A today, feel free to submit any questions that you have to the Q&A. It's just up in the top bit probably, or if you're joining with a teacher or a guardian, get them to post those questions there, and Shagaf and Nate will help manage that, and we'll be able to answer your question, get Annie to answer your questions. So one last little bit of housekeeping is that our session will be wrapping up at about 2:45 Australian Central Daylight Savings Time. But we do invite anyone to just drop into the Discovery Centre at any time if you're around, or drop us a line via the contact details on the website. But today, we need to get back to Annie. So we're joined by Annie Handmer, who is actually, where are you joining us from today, Annie?
I am joining from Gadigal lands in the Eora Nation. So for those of you who know where that is, that's on the east coast, so what we call Sydney. And yeah, I'm here joining from Sydney. It is so hot today. I'm absolutely melting. So if I sort of look like I'm, becoming warm, that's why. But, it's a beautiful day and it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, that's awesome. I'm sorry to hear it's so hot there. It's actually finally a bit cooler here in Adelaide after a few days of terrible, terrible hot weather. But yeah, would you like to tell us a little bit more about what you do? What do you do in the Australian space industry? Because obviously, we're talking to you today, so I imagine you probably do something, and sort of, how it fits into the industry as a whole.
I would love to. So I might start by giving a quick overview of what I'm up to these days. So I am working in the space sector. I also have a couple of voluntary positions. So I'm on the Space Industry Association of Australia's Advisory Council. I'm also involved, and I'll talk a bit more about it later, in the International Astronautical Congress 2025, organising team. So I have this position for that, which is called the IPC co-chair, or the International Programming Committee co-chair, which sounds very fancy, but I think it just means that I have to kind of shuffle things around and try and make things work, which is most work, to be honest. That's really what we do. So I'm involved in kind of that aspect of things. And I thought what I would do is go through and kind of give a bit of an overview. So so I have worked in a bunch of different places over the years, and talk about how I got to this point, which is with HEO Robotics, and then kind of where I'm going next from there. So if we head forward to the next slide, which I think, can I do it? No, I think you've got to do it. Okay, so here we are. So this is a photo of baby Annie. And the reason I want to show this photo is if you look in the background, you will see a lot of space content. There is a rocket, there's a Star Wars book, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening. And the reason I thought it was really important to show this photo is because this is actually not my bedroom. This was not what I was into as a kid. And a lot of the time when you talk about space, people assume you have to be that kid who was like totally into rockets, totally obsessed with Star Wars from day dot. And that's great. I love those people. Some of my best friends are those people. But not everyone has that journey into the space sector. And for me, it definitely wasn't that. So this is actually my brother's room. And if you go forward the next slide, this is more what I was doing as a kid, still nerdy, so hanging out, reading Harry Potter, a lot of Harry Potter content, and generally like just reading lots of books, hanging out outside, climbing trees, looking like an absolute style icon, I might add, in my matching navy blue on navy blue, denim on denim, actually I think it's corduroy on corduroy. What a vibe. So yeah, this is what I was up to. And I think it's important to say, like, I was not really a sciencey kid. I liked science, but I liked everything. I liked history, I liked geography, I liked English class, I liked maths, I liked, you know, all sorts of stuff. I liked sport. And yeah, and there's no kind of one size fits all when it comes to space, I think. I think space is unique in that way. So if you are looking at this, if you're attending today or watching this later, and you're someone who is not someone who's always dreamed of the stars or, you know, sold their teeth to buy a telescope at the age of 3, that's okay. Neither was I. In fact, I really didn't think about space much until I was much older. So if you jump forward again, here we go. So what do you do when you're a nerd? So I finished school and I was a total nerd still, and I studied things like music, and I did drama in year 11, music for the HSC, I did English, I did Latin. I was like just so, I guess, interested in humanities, and that was where I really found I thrived, and it spoke to me as a person. Things like music and musicology and performing were really important to me at that age when I was finishing school. So certainly no one ever suggested to me with an HSC that was made up mostly of music, Latin and English with a little bit of maths just to keep everyone happy, that that I would go and study something like aerospace engineering. It was just not on my radar. I don't think I knew what it was. I don't think like I'd ever really thought seriously about anything like that, right? So instead, I decided to go to university and basically just hang out. I decided to go and meet people. I did loads of musicals. I did lots of like extracurricular activities, hanging out with friends, getting up to mischief. I did not think about my CV. I did not think about where I was going next, despite everyone's best efforts to get me to do it. And I discovered this thing called philosophy. The reason I discovered that was because I was hanging out with a group of nerds who were doing science review, which I did, even though I wasn't studying science. And they were doing some philosophy classes, and I used to crash their classes. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I ended up majoring in that. And then I did honours in something called History and Philosophy of Science, which no one's ever heard of, but maybe more people now because I won't shut up about it. But History and Philosophy of Science was like this fantastic thing that was about, yeah, how does science intersect with society? And for me, it brought together so many interests that I had, and I did a bunch of research about science in Antarctica under the Antarctic Treaty System. Hence my cute meme here about penguins, which is so retro, but it is, I still think, a beautiful meme, and I do love penguins. So that was what I did. And the thing is, if you go to the next slide, like, what do you do when you're a nerd and you have a philosophy degree? And all of those questions people have been asking me along the way about what's your plan here, and what will you do after university, and how will you be gainfully employed, really came home to roost in a kind of moment of reckoning. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. So I decided to just apply for things. And I was like, well, at least I'll probably be the only philosopher applying for all these grad programs, so that'll give me a point of difference. I'll just go with that. So I wrote a bunch of cover letters, and my cover letters really did a lot of heavy lifting because my CV was basically like directed a musical at this point. So yeah, and I ended up at Deutsche Bank doing, would you believe it, investment banking in corporate finance in, now where was I? General industrials and private equity, which you might be thinking, that doesn't make any sense. And it didn't make any sense because nothing in life makes sense. Everything is crazy and random and delightful. So I got that job because I passed a maths test. So I guess the maths that I did for the HSC turned out to be useful. And also I talked to the team and they were like, you'd be great to be on the team. You know stuff about things, you know things about stuff. You can talk to clients about opera. You can talk to clients about musicals. You can like actually do the work. So that was great. And then after that, I went and worked for New South Wales Government in the Department of Premier and Cabinet. So I was working again on something totally different, which was the funding arrangements for the NDIS, the Intergovernmental Negotiations. And for that, they were like, well, you've got this background in finance, you clearly understand how to do numbers, great. And I was like, yep, I hope so. And then also all of those skills I'd gained in negotiation and so on through university were really useful. And then I ended up going and working in New South Wales Treasury for a little while, working on mental health stuff there, which was fantastic. And then back to New South Wales Government again in Premier and Cabinet working on foresight. So if we skip to the next slide, you'll be thinking, okay, where's space come in? And where space comes in here is I also, at the same time as doing all of this, was like, you know what, that's not enough on my plate. I am going to do a PhD. And for some reason, I decided to do it to do with space. It's not for some reason. Basically, I've really enjoyed history and philosophy of science. I'd really enjoyed studying science in Antarctica under this legal system called the Antarctic Treaty System. And I wanted to do something similar for my PhD, and I was sick of Antarctica, and I didn't think the deep sea sounded that fun. And the other thing that had a similar legal system in place was space. So I was like, I guess it's space, and started a PhD, which took 4 years full time, while also working part time and running the Space Junk podcast on the side, which was really fun. And I highly recommend all of you, if you ever like, I'm going to start a podcast, just start the podcast. It's so fun. It's so easy to do, and it's a great thing to do. So that was a really great experience. And after that, if you skip to the next slide again, I realized I needed to get a job again. So I got a call from a friend who'd started a startup, and that was HEO Robotics. And he said, do you want to come and work for us? We're doing a bunch of work on imaging in space, so taking pictures of objects in space and using that for sustainability, for security, for all sorts of purposes. And I thought, why not? So I decided to go and work there, which I did, last year, and it was a fantastic experience. And I actually recently decided to move on to my next adventure because when I joined, I was like, I want to help this company grow. So I had this sort of background, and I thought, yeah, let's grow this thing. And as I experienced that and so on, they've grown so much. They're doing such amazing things. I was like, you know what? I'm ready for my next adventure too. So if you skip forward, I just wanted to highlight one of the joys of working in the space sector, which is some of the cool stuff you get to work on. Some of my favorite things I worked on with HEO were identifying an unknown object, a UFO, which I'm happy to talk about more if there are questions, and also taking a photograph of a rocket body as it was doing an uncontrolled re-entry, which some of you will remember from the news. This was an amazing thing. Like, it was just so cool to be like, we're hearing about this thing, we can't see it, we're going to go take a photo of it, and there it is. So that was brilliant. And the other highlight, of course, that I need to call out is one of the brilliant things about working in the space sector on the next slide is the people that you work with. So I worked with a phenomenal team, a really diverse team of brilliant thinkers who are like, I honestly think some of the software engineers were actual wizards, and I told them so. I'd be like, can we build this? And they'd be like, yep. And I'd be like, that's going to take like 2 months, right? And they'd be like, no, it'll take about 3 days. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. So that was a brilliant thing to do. I loved that experience, and it was fantastic fun. So yeah, I would say, like, if you're considering a career in the space sector, one of the highlights is the people. They rule. And I would say on the next slide again, sorry, it's a bit awkward. I'm like, I don't know if I can do it maybe, that the sector is growing and there are so many amazing opportunities. So this is a graphic that I've borrowed from the Space Industry Association of Australia. Thank you so much. I rang up the other day. I'm like, have you got something I can use? And it's just got some of the companies that are doing space things, some of the places that you could work, some of the organizations that are doing things, and they're all really different. So like what Optus is doing is completely different from what Shoal is doing, is completely different from what Fleet is doing, AWS. All of these companies are doing different things. So there's so much diversity even in the sector. And I think the next slide is my last one. We pop forward, there we go. So the other thing I wanted to highlight is, if you're attending, you might be super excited to hear about the IAC, the International Astronautical Congress, which we're hosting in Sydney in 2025. So this is a photo that was taken at IAC in Paris earlier last year in September, and this is the bid committee. So we were all kind of there, and we were being interviewed by this panel, and there was this whole process to go through about trying to say, we want to host this thing. Now we're talking about a huge conference, like 6,000 people from all around the world, and we're saying, all of the space people, we want them to come to Sydney. We want to host you. We want you to experience Sydney and see what we're doing here in Australia. And the Space Agency was super involved in that. You could see the logo in the background there. So it was an amazing experience to work as part of that bid. And I'm really excited. Like, the work is only just beginning. I'm actually terrified of how much there is to do. And I know I have a lot of work I need to do, but I'm really excited for that. So put it in your calendars. It will be in 2025. And yeah, I'm really excited also to talk about like what that means for Australia in the sector. But that's everything from me that I wanted to say. So I'll hand back to Hannah.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I just loved how much, I loved how you actually, you've got such a diverse sort of range of interests, especially like you said, we always hear about the kid who just had all of the science, all of the space stuff in their room. And so it's so nice to be able to hear an experience that's a bit different, but I feel like a lot of people would actually really relate to that. Like, I know I definitely do. And so I wanted to ask, we get a lot of high school students coming through. And you mentioned that you did drama, you directed a play during uni. Would you say that sort of that experience has potentially helped you as you've navigated through developing your very diverse career as well, especially in the space industry?
Yes, in so many ways. I mean, for anyone who's been on stage as part of a production, there are so many. Well, first of all, like, where to begin? Where to begin? What a good question. So first of all, any production is about more than just the people that you see. So that goes for work as well. A lot of the time, your job is to make the product the best product it can be, and the customer never sees you, they see the product. So it's the same with a production. If you're working as a director or a producer, if you're backstage, if you're in the orchestra pit, which I've been on many an occasion, trying my best to play the notes right, or everyone comes together to produce this thing that you only see such a small amount of. If you've ever done a backstage tour somewhere, of any concert or any performance of any kind, you'll see so much space behind, and that's where all of the actual work goes on. It's the same in the space sector. And I will say as well, like, a lot of the time we highlight companies and their achievements, but a lot of what's going on in the background are organizations like the Space Agency, who are kind of in the background making sure that things actually work. And you'll always have, annoyances and say, well, why did the curtain come up at that time and not this time, and there was a problem with that prop or whatever. Ultimately, like, the show's there, and that's the win. So that's one thing. I'd say more personally, the experience of working with diverse teams, working with people who had different ways of working, the experience of pulling something together within that rush to get it ready in time, the experience of having to improvise when things go wrong, and also about being really flexible about how you get to a goal. So if you are putting on a show and you're always representing something you can't represent, so you cannot actually put water on stage if you're doing some sort of underwater scene. You can't do it. Not all of us are Avatar or whatever. So what you need to do instead is think about, okay, what are 10 ways that I can represent this on stage? And then you try out a bunch of different things, and then you have to be flexible. You might have really loved the idea of having actual, I don't know, cellophane across the whole front of the stage, and then you look at the budget and you're like, that's not going to work, and you come up with something else. So I think that flexibility has been really important, and the confidence as well that no matter what happens, it'll be okay. Because I have been in productions, Hannah, where things went so wrong, so wrong, props broke, people became unwell at the last minute, everything goes wrong, and you learn that you just keep on keeping on, and you just figure it out. I think that's super valuable. So yeah, anyone who's not currently taking drama, consider it.
Absolutely. Yeah, things go wrong in space as well. So if you've got the experience of things going wrong on stage, I imagine you're pretty prepared for things to go wrong in space as well.
Yeah, and I think on that, with space, people don't realize that when things go wrong in space, we don't always, it's more like improv, right? Because you don't know why something went wrong all of the time. It's not like if something goes wrong with a car and you're like, great, there's so many mechanics I can ring up and get help. There's so many, I know how to change a tire. Great. All of these things. It's not like that. It's every situation is unique. Every situation has its own elements to it. You are actually getting together with a bunch of people to be like, how can we get this satellite show back on the road as soon as possible before the audience walks out? That is kind of all you're trying to do. And that's a really exciting experience as well. And that's just the nature of space. It's hard, it's new, it's exciting, and we're still figuring it out.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to remind our audience that you can definitely, if you have any questions, just post them in the Q&A. I'd love to see some of your questions or some of your thoughts on everything we've been talking about so far. But I suppose on the topic of things going wrong, you've got a podcast, you've got a Space Junk podcast. You obviously, I follow you on Instagram. You're always on panels talking about space debris and junk. So did you want to sort of talk about how philosophy fits into space junk?
Oh, I would really like to do that. Philosophy fits into everything. Everything starts with philosophy. Philosophy is about how we think, how we approach problems, how we divide problems, how we think about our own existence. Without philosophy, you can't exist. That's how I feel about it. And that doesn't mean that you have to read all of Nietzsche. I really would not recommend that to anyone under any circumstances at any time. But what I will say is that there is value in thinking through things from first principles, thinking about things in different ways. And that's really just about asking questions. Thinking about, okay, here's how things appear to be. First of all, are they that way? That's a great question. What makes me think that they're that way? What are some ways that they could otherwise be? How could we get to that point? How would we think about that? How would that affect everything else? How would that be ethical or moral or not? So, all right, so to bring that back to space junk or space debris or orbital debris, depending on who you're talking to, all of these things are fine things to say. The only thing I don't like is space trash. I think that doesn't sound nice. But talking about that, then yeah, you have the same kind of discussion, which is, Well, what is space debris? It's stuff that we've left in space. Like, without us putting things into space, we don't really have space debris. Some people will quibble with that, I would say. The definition of the wording is kind of leading down that path. But there you go. Then you're getting into all sorts of other questions of philosophy. So we have things there. They're rocketing around at great speed. They obviously cause risk to space operations. That in turn causes risk to our day-to-day existence on Earth. But there are other questions to ask, which are questions of sustainability and morality, and what does it mean to be sustainable? Is it enough to say we're sustainable as long as nothing runs into each other, or we're sustainable as long as we only have 5 collisions a year, or we're sustainable as long as any collision happens below 600? Like, those are things that people talk about, but I think there's a broader question to ask before that, which is, why are we going to space? What are we hoping to gain from space, and what do we hope to bring to space? If we consider that, then you lead into a whole question about extraction, about the economy, about international competition, about politics, about, is there such thing as science for science's sake? That is where it gets really interesting. And then you're looking at this space debris as a byproduct of some other force at work, whether it is about, economic warfare, or whether it's about like political, like Cold War stuff, or whatever it is. You can have a very interesting conversation at that point, which goes beyond there is a lump of something that might run into a lump of something else.
Oh yeah. Now, space ethics, it's extremely interesting. And with everything, like, we just, at the rate that we are putting things up there, it's an extremely important topic. We've actually had a question on ethics, on space ethics, from, it's anonymous, but they were wondering about what your thoughts were on the ethics of people visiting other planets. I suppose it'd be really interesting, especially when you were talking about like science for the sake of science, combined with this, like, yeah, it'd be very interesting.
Yeah, I have strong feelings on this, and they're not always feelings that other people share. So I will say this is my opinion, not representing any organisation at this point. My own personal opinion about humans visiting other planets is, give me a good reason and I might get behind it. And my concern is this: sending humans to other planets has a range of ethical and environmental implications. It's a fun thing to do, and it's exciting, and we all love, the moon landings and all of that. However, every time you decide to send a human to another planet, you have to consider that you are introducing human biological substances to that planet. You are also bringing with that human a culture, a way of life, a way of thinking. You're bringing with that human a lot of expectation about how things are going to be. You're bringing at this stage still an extractive economy mindset of, I'm going to take things from this landscape to do something. Now, it is possible to say, people will say, oh, no, but it's fine because we'll just send, we send scientists, we send people for the purpose of science. My view is that there's really nothing that you can gain from a human that you can't gain from an appropriately equipped robot. The other benefit of sending a robot is that you don't have to bring the robot home again, sad as it is to see a robot kind of die in space. That is what robots are for. They go places that are really dangerous so that humans don't have to. I think there are huge ethical problems in sending humans into space, into a dangerous environment that is hostile to the human body, that is hostile to the human psyche. It's damaging. And into other planets. I mean, if we're talking other planets, you're talking, say, Mars, for example, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to bring those people home. So it all sounds great until you realize that if you send someone there and they break an arm, or they have an appendix problem, or they have any sort of issue, they're stuck there. And so that is a question for humanity, which is, if we're going to do that and in essence kind of sacrifice a human, why are we doing that thing? Are we just doing that to say that we can? And I think that's a bad reason, because we can know that we can and send a robot instead, and the robot will do a lovely job. So that's my feeling. And environmentally, I also think robots are a better idea. And also in dealing with off-Earth life forms in future, I think robots are better, because they give us an opportunity to decide how we want to, as humans, engage with other environments and potentially other life forms down the track as well. So yeah, plus you create loads of amazing jobs when you do robotics, and when you have robotics programs, you produce technologies and so on that are useful here on Earth as well. So yeah, that's my view on that. I think it's pretty unethical to send humans into space, even if they have consented to go. I think that's a high risk and not necessarily a good option.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear other people's like opinions. We always get people going, yes, let's send humans to space, but it's really, it's interesting to actually stop and think like, well, actually, why do we want to do that? Is there any benefit? Like, is it actually, I mean, I did engineering, and it's always like, okay, so is this the best method? Like, is there another method? Have I thought about the solution space? I could talk about ethics with you for hours, I think.
Well, and I will just give a quick plug to this photo on the slide. That I'm pointing to my name at the Space Discovery Centre. So I was part of the team who worked on the ethics kiosk in the exhibition that is at the Discovery Centre. So if you're interested in ethics, go check it out. If you're not interested in ethics, go check it out anyway. Like, what have you got to lose? So that's my quick plug.
Every single presentation I do here, I always plug that one. It's my favorite exhibit we've got. But we've also got lots of different exhibits, but I always get feedback being like, wow, I didn't think about this. So if you are in Adelaide or visit Adelaide, definitely check out the ethics tables that we've got here. Kind of switching it up a little bit. So you talked about doing humanities and science, and so we've got a question from someone they're anonymous. They're saying that they're going to do a mixture of humanities and science subjects through year 12. They want to go to university, but they don't know what to study. So do you have any advice as a nerd who liked both humanities and a bit of science on how to navigate that, because it's scary?
Yes, my advice is that university is terribly scary from the outside, and you look at it and you think, how on earth am I going to make sense of this thing? There's these, you get lists of subjects you have to enroll in. It's so hard, and half the subjects you've never heard of. And you go from studying something like history to then having to pick like one topic of history from a list of about 20 possible history topics. So I would say there are no wrong answers. You can always change your subjects once you've enrolled. You can still, you can usually even change your degree. You can enroll in one subject, go to the first lecture and think, nah, this sucks, and go to something else. You can meet some friends down at the pub, and then they can be like, we're taking this thing, and you could be like, I'm going to go take that thing. Yeah, fun fact, I met my partner in precisely that way. I was like, what am I going to study? And they were like, well, I'm going to class now. And I was like, can I come? And that's what happened. So yeah, so there's all sorts of possibilities there. But practically, I would suggest if you're interested in both, study both. Do a combined degree. Loads of universities now offer these liberal arts and sciences degrees where you get to do a bit of everything. That's a really good way of going about it. And then in terms of like first year picking subjects, pick what you actually are interested in. Don't pick just what you think sounds smart or what your parents think you should do. You are an adult, you are going to university, and here's a secret. Assuming that you're like putting your fees on HEX, like most people, you're actually paying yourself for the subjects you studied. So as I look every year at my mounting and horrifying HEX debt, I think about, was that worth it? And like, I chose my subjects, and I chose to study subjects like the philosophy of happiness, and I have no regrets. So that's my advice. Study what you're really interested in, and like, it doesn't matter if you think it sounds smart, just do it. Study subjects across arts and sciences and pick a degree structure that allows you to do that. And the final thing is, if you can find a subject like history and philosophy of science or something like that, that bridges those two things, take that, because it'll help you make sense of everything.
Yeah, I think that's such valuable advice. There's so many questions in the published section. Like, we've got so many questions. Very quickly, before we go on to some of those, we were talking before this about, so we've talked about university, but we were talking a bit before, you studied philosophy, which there's not really like a clear career path like there is if you did like engineering, for example. So just in your experience, how did you find being able to, like, what did you find was very useful in helping you be okay with all of that unknown about what do you do once you finish university, and honestly, ultimately working your way towards a career that didn't really exist probably when you were in high school?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'm still not sure my career exists. So, so yeah, like on that, how would I think about it? I definitely worried. I worried because I felt like I had expectation. I was actually doing a law degree as well. So I was doing arts law, and the law bit was meant to be the sensible bit, and the philosophy was meant to be the bit where I had some fun before I settled down for the rest of my life and became a lawyer. And there's nothing wrong with being a lawyer, but I didn't want to be one. And I knew I didn't want to be one forever. Like, I just knew that wasn't my path. So so what made me okay with it was I just decided I don't know what I want to do, but I know that it isn't law. So I decided not to keep doing law. I was like, again, I'm an adult. I'm paying to take these courses. I am setting my own future. I'm like, and it's really hard and really scary. And I definitely spent a lot of time like soul searching and being like, oh my God, I'm never going to find a job. But at the end of the day, if you just like look at what you're good at. And one of the things that I do sometimes when I'm feeling that way is sit down and write a list of what am I good at? And it's often like really silly things like, I'm really good at vacuuming. Like, I don't know why, but I'm just really good at it. It's not that I particularly like it. I just nail it every time. But I'm also like, I'm good at listening and being a supportive friend. I'm like, so you write down all the things you're good at, and that helps you be like, okay, no matter what, I can always talk my way into something by talking about not just what I've studied, which really is just evidence that I can, remember some things and study, but more importantly, that I'm the sort of person that is someone you might want to work with. And that's also really valuable. So just hold on to that. Like, you're really important. Everyone who's attending this call, I haven't met you, but I hope I do in the future. Say hi. And you're awesome. And like, just back yourself. You'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice for even anyone. Your degree, if you have a degree, or like your whatever qualifications you have, it's like, it's just a piece of paper. Really, what gets you a job or friends? It's like, it's who you are as a person. Like, nobody wants to. Yeah, it's just very important.
Actually, on that very quickly, very funny thing that happened the other day was I finally used my PhD. I used it because there was a large spider in my house, and I put a container over the top, and then I needed something large enough to slide underneath, and I used my PhD to slide underneath to take the spider outside and rescue it. So that's when you say it's just a piece of paper, like, it's definitely just a piece of paper.
There you go. Your PhD is saving lives. There you go. Who saw that? I love that so much. I'll go to a couple questions because we've only got 10 minutes left. No, not 10, 5 minutes left. It's gone so quick. Someone, yeah, so Caroline was wanting to kind of get your opinion on international laws on space. I suppose you've done a little bit of space law, and as a philosopher, it's quite closely related, especially in space. So just, it's a very broad question, but yeah, what are your opinions maybe in relation to space debris and that management?
My God, that's such a big question. And
I know.
5 minutes. You know what I'm going to say, Caroline, is this. I have written a bunch of stuff about this, and I've also got some podcast episodes about it. So go check that out. What I'll say about that now, though, is that space law is incredibly important. It is something that I deeply love, and it's something that I worry about terribly in terms of, will people continue to love this thing enough and look after the space law and maintain it and value it for what it is. So it's really important, and it's really like the only thing that has a chance of preventing us from getting into all sorts of strife.
Definitely, yeah. There's lots and lots of stuff online. I've seen events on space law. It's
in fact, just DM me, and I'll send you some links.
Yeah, we could do an hour-long talk on international law and space ethics, separate ones as well, by the way. But I don't know if we'll have time. Let's see, what else have we got? I like someone, they're anonymous. I think this is in relation to your ethical opinions on sending humans to space. They've asked, what about sending cyborgs? Oh. A bit of a fun one to sort of end up on.
What about sending cyborgs? I mean, I'd love to have a conversation about sending cyborgs. So what do you think about that? That's very interesting. I don't know, and it's not often I'm floored by a question, but I am floored by that question. So I'm going to go and think about that, and then I'll tweet about it once I've come up with an answer. How about that?
That sounds good. Yeah, it is. It is an interesting question. Yeah, it's reminds me of one of the ones in the ethics tables about there's like a would you go to space ethics quiz.
Yes, yeah, that one was fun. Yeah.
I would turn that onto the audience, being like, would you go to space if you were like had to undergo some surgeries, have some robotic limbs added to you for insurance purposes? I think we've got space. We've got Carolyn has also said, thank you for inspiring women and girls in this industry. Thought I'd pass on the thank you. I have probably ask this question here. This is a little bit more to do with, we've talked about your experience of going from humanities mostly into pretty much, it's very much a STEM dominated field. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think about maybe people who want to go the other way? So someone who has gone through their career as a scientist or an engineer and are wanting to move into space-related industries, maybe even looking into some humanities stuff as well. This is from Daryl. I might have butchered it slightly, but yeah.
That's all right. Hey, Daryl. Okay, so if you're going the other way, well, I mean, that's an amazing question. And I'll use this as an opportunity just to say that I have really enjoyed, as part of my career, working with very technical people. As I said, like at the beginning, I think of them as wizards. I think that people who have engineering abilities, who have, like whether it's, you know, with their hands or in design, but also people who work in trades. So people who can actually build a rocket, whether or not they've gone to university and done a degree, people who have that ability are like just so wonderful, and I'm in awe of that every time. So it is a privilege to work with technically minded people, STEM fields, and with trades as well. If you wanted to learn more about humanities, lucky you, there are so many ways to do it. You absolutely don't have to go to university and study philosophy. You can actually find all sorts of resources online. You can watch videos, you can read books, you can just, start yourself asking, why is this, why is that? And yeah, get engaged in that way. I think that that's something that we often say, like, if you want to learn to code, okay, we'll just, go online and learn to code. Well, similarly, if you want to learn about humanities, just go online and learn about humanities. And I really encourage you to actually do that. That's a fantastic thing to do. And I think everybody should, as part of a balanced education, and as part of life, have exposure to all of these things, because they're what makes it so wonderful to be a human. And maybe circling back to the cyborg thing, I mean, I think, the fundamental question there is what makes us human? What is human? And so, yeah, to bring that back, what makes us human is that we get to do things like this, have these sorts of conversations and think about space. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, I think that is the perfect place to actually, perfect note to end our Q&A today. Thank you so much, Annie, for spending the time, taking the time out of your very busy schedule to have a chat to us. I've definitely loved every second of it. Thank you so much for sharing your story and answering everyone's questions, including my own. Also, thank you to everyone who joined us today. You've had such great questions. It's been really awesome. And yeah, so before I finish up, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about space in Australia and how to get involved in the Australian space industry, definitely come and visit us at the Australian Space Discovery Centre here in Adelaide. We would love to have you come by. We've also got our website with a few online resources, but if you have the opportunity, definitely come in person. It's awesome. You can see Annie's name on the wall. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. Also check out Annie's social media and podcasts. They're really cool. I'll finish up on that one as like, yes, check out her a little bit more. This is only an introduction into her. And yeah, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the day.